I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
There we go, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being with us today. What I guess is the Monday before Thanksgiving. It's the week of Thanksgiving. This is what everybody... I mean, the holidays are upon us. The holidays are here. Now, most of your talk radio hosts that you listen to, if memory serves correct, are going to be gone this entire week, by the way. Did you know that? I'm pretty sure that's kind of what happens, you know? Most of your what would you call them? Habitual, not habitual talk radio hosts, but, you know, the national syndicated guys, they're probably going to be gone all week. But, hey, I'm going to be here through Wednesday. We're going to be doing this through Wednesday, so we're excited. The telephone number, 870-275-9799. The belief is, I don't know why, maybe the belief is that there's not as many people listening, because their routines are, kind of messed up. I will tell you this, at this point, Wednesday's going to be fun, because that's the busiest travel day of the year. People flying in airports, having their Fourth Amendment rights violated by the TSA. That's definitely something that I'm not thankful for. Or, a lot of people are going to hit the road. I'm going to be hitting the road later in the day on Wednesday and traveling, so that's always fun and exciting. Excited about going over Governor William Bradford's journal. We'll do that on Wednesday. Also, read a couple of Thanksgiving Day proclamations from Abraham Lincoln and George Washington, because it is incredible when you go back and read these documents. The acknowledgement of a higher power, the reverence, the faith in divine providence from our leaders a long, long time ago. It's really, to me, it's always very positive and very much uplifting. But in the meantime, we got a great show for you today. Coming up at the bottom of this hour, we'll be talking with Michael Busler, the professor of finance from Stockton University in New Jersey. He's going to be checking in. We got a few things to talk about. Did you hear that the President of the United States met with the head of the Federal Reserve, and the President said they talked about negative interest rates? We'll talk to Michael Busler about what that means. Also, Alibaba, this Chinese technical company, this giant, they are going to be opening an IPO. And it's expected to be ridiculously high. I'm sorry, my ad blocker's inhibiting this article here, but I've got a Forbes piece. Alibaba bets on Hong Kong for financial and political reasons. So we'll talk to Dr. Busler about that. Speaking of Hong Kong, we also have Patrick Deakins next hour, Washington County JP. Speaking of Hong Kong, though, Hong Kong voters deliver landslide victory for pro-democracy campaigners. Hong Kong voters deliver landslide victory for pro-democracy campaigners. It's a big deal. So I didn't even know they had an election. I'm going to be quite honest with you. But they had an election. I've been watching what's going on in Hong Kong, but I've been, watching all of the travesties. You got that one guy, Donald Trump, don't trust China. China is that guy, But anyway, The Guardian reporting, Hong Kong's voters have delivered an unprecedented landslide for pro-democracy candidates in local elections in a powerful show of solidarity with the city's protest movement and rebuke to the government over its handling of the crisis. People turned out in record numbers to eject pro-Beijing politicians. They held on to little over 10% of the 452 openly contested seats. Pro-democracy candidates won a majority of seats in all 18 councils, although they will only control 17 because a large number of government appointees shifted the balance of power in the Islands District. Both in absolute numbers and in turnout rates, it was easily the biggest exercise in democratic participation that Hong Kong has seen, with many voters waiting more than an hour to cast their ballots. So, what is the government of China going to do next? Well, if you go over to the Arkansas Democrat Gazette this morning, they have a piece entitled China's Detainee Practices Outline, Files Leaked on Re-Education Sites. That's right, folks. I mean, we've heard this before, but this is a little bit more comprehensive because there's documents that are at least claimed to be confidential. Well, they were confidential. Now everybody in the media has them, and the press is reporting on the international press. The Consortium of International Journalists. This is where the initial previously confidential documents were sent. So they like to lock up members of minority groups. Most of them are Muslims this year. It's been a big push over in China over the last year to really try to re-educate Muslims. And listen to this. The Democrat Gazette writes, in order to rewire their thoughts and even the language they speak. So they want them speaking Mandarin fluently. This article details an entire checklist or a points system that each one of the I'm going to go ahead and call them concentration camps instead of re-education camps. Is that okay with you, Joe, if I go ahead and call these concentration camps? I kind of feel like that's what they are. So they detail that in these well, I mean, listen, they the documents talk about watchtowers, double-locked doors, blanket video surveillance. I think we can just call this a concentration camp. And again, this elaborate scoring system, right, where they grade the detainees on things like how well do you speak Mandarin, how well have you memorized our communist ideology, and adhere to strict rules on everyday tasks such as bathing and using the toilet. Interesting thing, I had a conversation with a close friend of mine. A friend of the family's. And this individual was telling me the practices when you go to like write entertainment. If you were to like write entertainment scripts for China, right? You have to talk to their government. You know, if you're gonna perform something in China or anything else. So let's say like for kids, you got to go through the government, you know, Office of Entertainment or whatever. I don't know what the exact name is, but like it is so insane how sensitive they are about things we would take for granted, right? There was one part in the script where it got rejected because they had a character who was going to be the mayor of a town, and the mayor wasn't bad, he wasn't corrupt, but because he was just an obstacle and a part of the story, you know, like a character obstacle that you had to overcome, but not in a military, not in, you know, but because it was the mayor, right? It was like, no, you can't do that. You can't literally, it's almost like you can't even talk about the public officials, you know, in their entertainment in any way at all, unless it would be like, you know, they're the heroes or whatever else. It was a fascinating discussion that I had over the weekend with somebody who knows about this stuff. Back to this article here. Let's see, Watchtowers documents also show how Beijing is pioneering a new form of social control using data and artificial intelligence. And that, you know what? Google is helping them, by the way. Google is helping them. Everybody wanted to talk about the NBA and they couldn't believe the NBA. I mean, it was terrible and outrageous that the NBA would, you know, bow to the communists all for money. Arkansas is doing the same thing, by the way, all for the promise of jobs. And, of course, the governor's law firm being run by his son has the same Chinese clients that are getting Arkansas taxpayer dollars. Or I'm going to assume that has something to do with it as well. But Google's been doing this. It hasn't made the news. It's just, maybe a story here or a story there. But Google is assisting the Chinese government in enslaving their own people. I've said this for several years now. I think I've said this for probably 10 years. We do have the technology now, from a surveillance standpoint, to enslave ourselves, to enslave a population where you could put a camera on literally in every room of every house, or it's certainly every corner. And this, artificial intelligence. Everybody, for a long time, when you first heard Google talk about, oh, it's not really artificial intelligence. They can't really do that. Well, they can't. If you read up on it now, it's pretty scary. It is pretty scary. And it's like the weirdest thing in the world. It's like you had all these Google people sitting around watching the Terminator movies and thinking it was a good idea to create some sort of sentient computer system. You know what I mean? Or sitting around watching The Matrix and being like, yeah, you know what? It didn't work out for them, but I think we can control it. But that's what Google is doing right now in China. And it's really, and by the way, some of the biggest people who are opposing what middle America, a lot of Trump voters, what our ideals, what we hold dear, some of the ones who are opposing us, censoring us on social media, they work at Google too. I don't think that's a coincidence, personally. Let's see. Experts say they spell out vast systems that targets, surveils, and grades entire ethnicities to forcibly assimilate them, especially the Uyghurs, a Turkic minority of about 10 million with their own language and culture. Quote, they confirm that this is a form of cultural genocide. The documents, they're saying, are cultural genocide because they are, I guess, the Chinese are being very successful at oppressing and re-educating these people. It really, listen to this, it really shows that from the onset, the Chinese government had a plan to deal with dissidents, and they execute it in a way that would make the old Soviet Empire, from what I can tell, blush or just envious, They are very, very communist. Let's see here. We keep going. The documents came from an anonymous source, and the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists verified them by consulting experts cross-checking content, comparing signatures. So, does it say anything about organ harvesting in here? No. But, boy, what this is showing us is that the Chinese are extremely efficient at oppressing people and changing their minds. And you guys should check this out. This is just absolutely, it's tragic what's going on, And I have to remind everybody of the elephant in the room. For some reason, we think here in Arkansas that we can trust the communist Chinese because they have dropped the communist label and they've put the capitalist hat on and the capitalist T-shirt on, and they're a company, and they're in the paper business. Oh, they're a company though. They're in the textile business. They're different. They're not loyal to the communist Chinese. We're told by our Arkansas officials, they're investors like everybody else. They're free like everybody else. It's an oppressive regime. Why would we think we could trust the communist Chinese here in Arkansas? And yet, we move forward. We continue to do so. We're going to take a break. When I come back, we're going to talk about this fired Secretary of the Navy. Have you heard about this? Secretary of the Navy's fired. I'll tell you why here in a minute.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
As we speak, Beijing is employing a whole-of-government approach, using political, economic, and military tools as well as propaganda to advance its influence.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
Yeah, Randy on Facebook writing, China, Hong Kong, body parts available, but we had to discard the brains because they were messed up. I actually didn't think about that. If you think about the leftists that support China and the leftists that think it was perfectly okay selling the body parts of aborted babies, it's not as if the United States can claim total innocence and the moral high ground here, right? I mean, I do have to point that out. You've got the Chinese taking the DNA of these political dissidents and then selling their organs, hooking them up to machines. What's the difference between what was made public? It was made public that Planned Parenthood and that these folks were profiting off of the deaths, and that the body parts were more valuable than the baby themselves, the life. I mean, what's the difference there? You tell me. It was made public. Everybody saw it. And yet, I don't know if you heard this, but a jury found the guy who made the undercover video guilty in California. Ooh, California. Man, you guys are a messed up state, to say the least. Is it any surprise that the President of the United States would fire someone when he was made in modern day famous by saying you're fired on The Apprentice? During the bogus sham impeachment hearings last week or the week before, when they interviewed the ambassador from Ukraine, it kind of dawned on me when you hear, she had nothing. She had no evidence. She was just mad that she got fired. And I thought, I mean, are we really? This is Donald Trump here. Obama fired a bunch of Bush ambassadors, by the way, but I don't expect the left to, admit that or concede that point. But, I mean, it's Donald Trump, and he's firing someone, and you're bringing that up in the impeachment inquiry? How ridiculous is that? Ridiculous. It's just kind of funny when you think about it. It's like, well, we elected a guy who was famous for firing people. Of course he's going to fire people. I mean, but anyway, check this out. It actually wasn't Donald Trump. I mean, it probably was. But the Secretary of Defense has fired the Secretary of the Navy for lack of candor. This has to do with Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher. Now, the president tweeted out last week, I think, Eddie Gallagher's fine. He's still going to be Navy SEAL. We're going to let him keep his trident. And this was after Trump intervened in several cases that he thought, these guys, we need to take care of them. They've been brought up on these charges, based upon the Military Code of Justice, and once your story gets out, people are saying, you know what, I think you guys served your country, and I don't think we should, be prosecuting some of our soldiers for some of this stuff. Well, so I thought this might happen because towards the end of the week last week, I saw that there was a headline where the Navy Secretary had said that we don't consider Trump's tweet an order, a lawful order, so we're going to go ahead and put Eddie Gallagher through this this examination board and make sure, decide whether or not we're going to take his trident or not. And that's kind of what got the ball rolling here. The Pentagon announced Sunday that Defense Secretary Mark Esper has asked Navy Secretary Richard Spencer to resign for not telling him he had a private conversation with the White House over the taking away of Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher's Navy SEAL Trident pen. Now, what was that private conversation? Well, if you go over to the Fox News reporter Jennifer Griffin, she tweeted this: U.S. official tells me when Secretary of the Navy went to White House to ask POTUS to let Navy Review Board go forward, he promised the board would, in the end, allow Gallagher to keep his trident and rank. In other words, he promised to fix the results of the board, which is usually a board of peers. I'm told Navy Secretary Spencer blindsided Defense Secretary Esper and General Mark Milley, who had gone to the White House to defend the Navy decision and asked that Trident Review Board be allowed to proceed. When the White House told them about the back deal Spencer tried to cut, which did not jibe with what Spencer had told Defense Secretary and Chairman of Joint Chiefs, it also was counter to Spencer's public statements. In other words, Spencer was not honest with them or the public, so Esper asked for his resignation. So the White House essentially saying, look, this guy came here and said, let us do the whole process. It'll be a formality. We'll make sure he keeps his trident pen. Now, I mean, I guess let's launch an impeachment investigation about why Trump fired the Navy Secretary. Then this other tweet. In the end, Navy Secretary Richard Spencer was not fired for standing up for military justice, but for dishonesty and undermining the military justice system, according to a senior U.S. official. He was fired for lack of candor. Yeah, and who knows, Richard, this might be another setup of the president, where this Navy Secretary is going to the White House saying, hey, I can fix it for you. We can go ahead and do this, and I'll fix it for you. And the White House is going to be like, at this point, they don't trust any of these guys. I bet at the, just like there's at the State Department, there's all these kind of lifers and everything else. And I understand this guy was appointed by the President Trump, but you just never know. I would have a question. How many deep staters are there in the Department of Justice? You know what I mean? And I think that's a question that a lot of people might have. Speaking of the State Department, the current State Department, run by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, there's a liberal watchdog group, and they've been trying to nail Rudy Giuliani. A lot of people think Rudy Giuliani may be indicted or be a fall guy or something. Be another Mike Flynn where they'll trump up charges. But Rudy Giuliani, this liberal watchdog group, is actually FOIA'd the U.S. State Department. And on Friday, they released the documents requested. And instead of it being a smoking gun against Rudy Giuliani, the documents are actually detailed accusations of corruption against the Bidens. Some might even say it's evidence of corruption. Responding to the Freedom of Information Act lawsuit from the group Oversight or American Oversight, the State Department on Friday night released almost 100 pages of records detailing efforts by Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani to investigate corruption, which include contacts with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Representative Devin Nunes. While American Oversight's gotcha is that Giuliani had multiple contacts with Pompeo, they completely ignore interview notes containing detailed allegations by former UK prosecutor General Viktor Shokin, which Biden had fired, by the way, in exchange for the $1 billion.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
And benefit its interests in the United States.
And I have wanted to welcome back to Arkansas Chairman Chu. Please give Chairman Chu a round of applause.
China is also applying this power in more proactive ways than ever before to exert influence and interfere in the domestic policy and politics of this country.
Chairman Chu, I got to know as he is the CEO and chairman of Shandong Ruyi Technology Group out of Shandong Province.
Over the past 17 years, China's GDP has grown ninefold. It's become the second largest economy in the world. Much of this success was driven by American investment in China. And the Chinese Communist Party has also used an arsenal of policies inconsistent with free and fair trade, including tariffs, quotas, currency manipulation, forced technology transfer, intellectual property theft, and industrial subsidies that are handed out like candy to foreign investment.
We've been to Shandong Province a number of times since I've been governor. We've called on people, and Chairman Chu gave us the opportunity to meet with him at Ruyi, at their technology group there in Shandong, and saw his incredible facility. We asked him to visit Arkansas. He did. So Chairman Chu, we're delighted to have you here. I'm excited about signing this agreement with you, and I welcome you to Arkansas.
These policies have built Beijing's manufacturing base at the expense of its competitors, especially the United States of America.
And I wanted to recognize Chairman Li to my right, who is the founder of Sun Paper of Shandong Province in China.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, 870-275-9799, if you want to contribute to the conversation. This morning, we have public policy analyst, economics expert, and professor of finance from Stockton University back with us, Dr. Michael Busler. Dr. Busler, how are you, sir?
Good morning, Paul. How are you? I'm doing well. It's always my pleasure to be here.
Yes, sir. It's always our pleasure to have you on. So I wanted to talk to you about this piece that I saw. Let's see here. Trump says negative interest rates were discussed during a call or a meeting with the Federal Reserve Chairman Powell. Negative interest rates. What's that about, Dr. Busler?
Yeah, negative interest rates have been used actually in Japan to try to stimulate their economy somewhat. I don't think we're going to go that far. I mean, the Federal Reserve did realize that as the economy was attempting to finally grow out of a really 10-year stagnation, the Federal Reserve overreacted and caused economic growth to slow. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, they raised interest rates from the end of 2016 to the end of 2018. They raised interest rates 8 times. And granted, they were at rock bottom near zero, and they had to come up eventually, but they ended up raising them too fast. And just as the economy was breaking out of this 2% growth rate we were locked in for the last decade, finally starting to hit 3%, the Federal Reserve's action ended up slowing the economy down, and now we're struggling to get back to 3%. Well, the Fed Reserve realized they made a mistake. So in July, September, and October this year, they dropped interest rates back down by 1/4 point each time, and they also stopped their reverse quantitative easing, where they were shrinking the money supply. So they realized they made a mistake. I think, though, now they have them at about the right level. So I expect economic growth. The fourth quarter is probably going to be a little iffy, although I expect the Christmas buying season to be very strong this year, probably 4 to 5% greater than it was last year, so pretty good jump. But the GDP number will not be as strong as we like it. But going into next year, I think they've dropped interest rates enough that economic growth will pick up. And President Trump simply said, look, other countries like Japan have negative interest rates. We should be there too. Although, as you know, I'm a strong supporter of President Trump. I don't agree with him on that. As I say, I think interest rates are about at the level where they should be. And I expect economic growth in the next quarter, first quarter next year, to pick up.
Well, yeah, and I see that upon the mention in the reporting that they talked about negative rates, the dollar slumped. And, of course, this was a couple of days ago, but still, isn't that interesting, the psychological impact that one statement can have just from the president, you know?
Yes, it certainly is. So people behave based on their perception of what they expect the future to be. So anytime there's any information comes out that alters their perception, it is going to have somewhat of a effect. For instance, look at this impeachment that we're going through now. Normally, when we go through what would be a crisis like this, the stock market sees all kinds of uncertainty coming, and whenever there's uncertainty, people back off, especially investors. Now, that's not happening. In fact, the stock market is hitting record highs. So I think what the stock market, the perception investors have, and again, perception means a lot here, the perception they have is that the president will not get impeached. He really didn't do anything worthy of impeachment, is what the business community feels, or the investors feel. And as a result, they're sort of shaking this off. So even if the House does vote to impeach, they're fairly confident, the investors, that President Trump will stay in office, and his economic policies that have done wondrous things for the economy will continue.
We're just talking a little bit about, the big Democratic victory for the people of Hong Kong. I have this financial piece here, though, about Alibaba betting on Hong Kong for financial and political reasons, and there's going to be an IPO of at least $11 billion on the Hong Kong stock exchange for Alibaba. What can you tell us about that, Dr. Bustler?
So Alibaba is a very large Google kind of company in China. They haven't been able to expand into Hong Kong previously, but it looks like they will be able to do that now. They're going to set up a separate entity to be able to handle that, and it'll go through the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, which is a little more like normal stock exchange. The stock exchange in China is regulated by the government. So investments there, while they're profitable and people have done well, there's another element of risk put in there because of the government. In Hong Kong, they're attempting to get more of a democratic government, and for the business community, that's a pretty good thing. So what happened in Hong Kong, recall, in 1997, British, England, which controlled Hong Kong, turned over control to China. And China promised that they would allow Hong Kong to have essentially a two-system government. So, which meant they still had to follow some of China's rules, but they could elect their own leaders and have their own kind of government approaching more of a democracy. Well, in the last 4, 5, 6 years, China has changed that, and they started to clamp down on a lot of things. What set off the protest this time was that China said, look, if somebody commits a crime in Hong Kong, we want to extradite them to mainland China to stand trial. and the people of Hong Kong knew they wouldn't get a fair trial, so they protested against this. China eventually said, okay, we're not going to do that. But in the meantime, we started all this protest, and the people in Hong Kong said, we want our freedom. You promised democracy. You've been taking some things away. We don't want that. In the last election, which was just held yesterday, candidates who supported democracy and more freedom in Hong Kong did exceptionally well. That's what's happening over there in Hong Kong.
Wow. Well, we'll certainly be watching it. I mean, I'm telling you, I definitely think the rise of China, we've been talking about it a lot here, how, the Arkansas implications here in our state, because we're trying to bring Chinese companies here, and that's very troubling. But yeah, I think we got to be wary of what they're doing and how they have they definitely want to supplant us economically. Let me get an update from you, Dr. Bussler, on the tariff situation, the trade war. Where are we on that right now?
So I think everything President Trump has done in this trade war has worked out very well. It's taken a little longer than we thought, but recall when President Trump came into office, he took a look at every one of our trade agreements, and for whatever reason, every single one of them was slanted in favor of our trading partners and to the detriment of the U.S. For instance, in the automobile industry, they make a car in Europe, sell it in the U.S., we charge a 2.5% tariff. We make a car in U.S., sell in Europe, they charge a 10% tariff. China, we charge them a 2.5% tariff. They charge a 25% tariff. On Corvettes, for whatever reason, they charge a 50% tariff. Well, what that meant was Europe and China weren't buying too many of our goods because they were priced so high as a result of the tariff. We were buying more of their goods. So when we buy more of their goods, money flows out of the country. When they buy our goods, money's supposed to flow in, but they're not buying that much. So we end up with this huge negative balance of trade. So President Trump said, we have to fix this right away. So he called all the trading partners in. Every single one of them was reluctant because they're in a good position. They're certainly in no hurry to change anything. So President Trump said, as any business person would, when you have a negotiating partner who's reluctant, you create a sense of urgency. So what he did was he put tariffs on everybody, created a sense of urgency, and what happened? Mexico and China have come up with a new deal, although the House of Representatives are dragging their feet on approving it. But Mexico and Canada have come up with a new deal. Japan has signed a new deal. South Korea has signed a new deal. India is negotiating with us. And for the first time since we normalized relations with China, they're seriously negotiating a better trade pact. The original question was, what's the status of that? It looks like phase one has been worked out, and the deal should be signed shortly. Now, I'm a little reluctant to say that because back in May, we were at the same position. We had a deal with them. We're all set to sign. At the last minute, they started to throw in some things that we just couldn't agree with, mostly with intellectual property rights, and that deal broke down. I think they've resolved most of the issues, at least in the first phase, and I do expect something to be signed shortly. But there's a lot of variables here, and the Chinese could come up with something at the end that kills the deal. President Trump says, if we can't come up with a good arrangement, we're not going to sign anything.
Well, and then even if we sign something, will the Chinese be trustworthy on that? I don't know. There's that one Hong Kong dissident who says, Donald Trump, don't trust China. I think that's kind of sound advice. But at the same time, I hope that there's some resolution, Yeah,
I do too. China is really being hurt by this far more than we are. And the reason is this. We put tariffs on goods from them, steel and aluminum, and eventually it'll go down to clothing and everything else if something isn't signed. So that does raise the price somewhat here, but we can make our own steel, we can make our own clothing if necessary. The Chinese retaliate by putting tariffs on food, on the agricultural industry. The thing is, they can't make enough food to feed their people, which is why they buy so much from us normally and everybody else in the world. So now they put tariffs on food that raises the price of food. And remember, the reason American companies are in China in the first place is the labor cost is so low. So you have workers who get very low wages. Now you're raising the price of food to them. It's going to create, and it is creating, some severe problems, I think, putting a lot of pressure on the Chinese government. Their economy, which has been growing rapidly for decades, has started to slow down as a result of this trade issues. And I don't think China can last a whole lot longer like this. So I do expect them to come up with some kind of an agreement, at least phase one, this year, before the end of this year. And I hope that bodes well going forward.
Dr. Michael Busler, appreciate it, sir. Have a happy Thanksgiving. We'll do it again soon.
Thank you, Paul.
All righty. Folks, 870-275-9799. That's the telephone number. We'll put a YouTube video of this up at conduitnews.com. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We would really appreciate it. You click the subscribe button, Conduit News YouTube, and then you click the little bell to receive notifications. We'll be back in just a moment.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
I also want to recognize Secretary Ma of Shandong Province.
As President Trump said just this week, in his words, we rebuilt China over the last 25 years.
Last November, as you know, I traveled to Shandong Province. I met with Chairman Li. I toured Sun Paper Company along with Mike Preston. While in China, we signed a letter of intent on behalf of the state of Arkansas with Sun Paper, indicating that Sun Paper wanted to put a major bioproducts mill in South Arkansas, in Arkansas.
In a world full of constituents with social media accounts, bloggers just looking to increase their page views, and a talk radio host who generally is just the worst, how are Little Rock's elite supposed to conduct business with such a lack of privacy? Introducing the 1835 Club, older and more refined than other clubs that claim discretion. The 1835 Club is for seasoned political veterans that want to conduct the highest form of aristocratic business with the public's money. Are you a schemer? Do you someday want a guaranteed flow of taxpayer money to support your business? Is it your dream to see the .gov domain at the end of your business website? Don't listen to the imitators. The 1835 Club is the place where corrupt politicians and businessmen hatch their next crony schemes. At the 1835 Club, we make lobbying safe and legal. Ethics. Why, of course. All business is done in an ethical manner. Just look for the sign above the door that reads, loophole. Are you tired of the Capitol Police restricting your access to the roof after a perfectly good night of drinking? The 1835 Club has libations and a perfectly good roof. Other crony clubs that promise discretion try to lure you in by advertising bars made out of aeroplanes. Well, at the 1835 Club, instead of an airplane fuselage, We've got a space shuttle. No, not a bar. We've got an actual space shuttle that makes a daily run to the moon so members of the 1835 Club can have some real privacy away from the bloggers and taxpayers. Are you an Arkansas aristocrat? Do you want to be? It's the 1835 Club, and we work tirelessly to make sure the good old boy system remains alive and well. Join today.
Disclaimer. The 1835 Club reserves the right to deny membership to anyone who has principles. Any talk of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution must be done in jest or, at the very least, with a condescending tone. And finally, the 1835 Club will be given a 25% commission of any agreements made between politicians and the business community.
PHP Parody.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back. 870-275-9799. That's the telephone number if you would like to contribute to the conversation. 870-275-9799. So I have been refreshing a lot of websites over the last couple weeks, looking for China stories, looking for stories about the governor, his son, his law firm, and Chinese clients. The same, and just because I'm like, is there anybody else who's going to write about this? I mean, the Arkansas Times has written a little about it. Conduit has been the one that's been all over this, though. Still nothing from the Gazette. Talk Business and Politics asked one question to John Brummett about it. John Brummett said more people need to be paying attention to it, and yet nobody's from his papers paid attention to it, from what I can tell. Then we have Arkansas Business. So I've also been refreshing Arkansas Business. Like, okay, Arkansas Business Publishing Group. I mean, this would be right up their alley, right? I hope that they're looking into this. I hope they're aware of it. This is about the business of the Chinese. It's a big news story, in my opinion. And anyway, in the course of refreshing the site like Arkansas Business, I found this story that had kind of fallen through the cracks. It was written back on November the 11th by Mark Friedman, and it's kind of an update on what's happened in this case between the president of the Senate, Jim Hendren, one of the governor's nephews, and this lawsuit that his company's involved in that has to do with this other company that essentially funnels criminals who don't want to go to jail into a job, but they never got paid for that job. The company gets paid. The would-be inmates do not get paid. Does that make sense? And so there's been a lawsuit that's been filed over this, and now we have some more, some updates, because there's a judge that seems to think there's some merit to this case. So over at Arkansas Business, Mark Friedman writing that back in 2016, a guy by the name of Levi Crow was offered a choice. You could go to a drug recovery program or you could go to jail. So, of course, he didn't want to go to jail. But it says here that he had no idea that the recovery program would include working a full-time job without any pay. So he wound up at this company called DARP, which is a nonprofit based out of Oklahoma, and they offer drug and alcohol recovery services at a 60-bed facility in Benton County. Requires that the participants, though, work a full-time job for the duration of the program, at least 6 months. If they don't work, they could go back to court and then land in jail. So through this company, DARP, this guy named Crow, who's kind of the basis for this whole lawsuit, which, by the way, you know, the idea of a program like this sounds great to me. You know what I'm saying? You know, we've got to find a way to teach people skills, especially if you've gone down this path of drugs and addiction, right? But at the same time, I see the other side saying, but they don't actually get paid, you know? Like, not even like minimum wage. And that's what this is over here. So Crow, like other residents, ended up at Hendren Plastics, a plastics plant in Gravette, owned by Senator Jim Hendren. There, Crow worked for 40 hours a week or more without getting paid. Instead, Hendren Plastics paid DARP for the participants' work. The residents got none of the money, hence the lawsuit. So, in 2017, the people who were being housed and boarded, I guess, at the DARP facility, there was a class action lawsuit, and it was against DARP and actually Hendren Plastics specifically, saying that the residents were entitled to money. They were entitled to the minimum wage. They were also entitled to overtime pay. And DARP obviously is fighting it. They're saying, look, these are residents living in our facility. They are not employees. And so because they're not employees, they're not subject to Arkansas's Minimum Wage Act. But the attorney, Tim Stedman, says that DARP was a staffing agency. So you've got this attorney, Tim Stedman, representing 175 members of this lawsuit here. And U.S. District Judge Tim Brooks has agreed with the plaintiffs in a September order holding that DARP and Hendren Plastics, quote, were businesses that manipulated the labor market and skirted compliance with the labor laws for their own private ends. And he will decide later how much DARP and Hendren Plastics owe the class members, which could be about $1.2 million. Hendren Plastics says that they're going to appeal and that they're very disappointed and everything else. I mean, you know, this is one of those things where I'm kind of like, I really can see both sides of this issue, you know? Maybe they just should have gone to jail, though. I mean, right? Maybe you do have people here who are supposed to be going to jail anyway. I've often been told about an idea specifically for prisons, and you know, you have two basically prison systems, right? If you got to go to prison, you can go to prison, you know, that prison, the one where you are worried about things happening to you in vulnerable situations. You can go to that prison, or you can go to this other one where you've got some sort of factory where, but see, in that vision, though, you are being paid minimum wage. Like in this idea, you have a public-private partnership where if you want to learn to work, you want to learn a skill, here you go. But we don't even have to pay you minimum wage, though. We have to pay you something. But in and of itself, the idea, all I'm saying is that the idea of instead of going to jail, you go and learn a skill to try to rehabilitate yourself. That's not a bad thing at all. That is not a bad idea, because oftentimes prison and the way we've been doing things is not actually rehabilitating anybody. That's why you have a lot of these repeat offenders, because they get back out of prison and they haven't been taught how to do something else. So they go back into the lifestyle that got them in prison in the first place. But we'll see what happens. I mean, I would think that in some world, you know, the absence of pay, it certainly looks terrible. But I would think in some world, if you're going to do something like this, you're going to compensate them. Even if you're not letting them have it now, you're putting something in some sort of savings account until their time is done, and then they have a lump sum to start a new life somewhere else. I mean, that would be ideal to me. That's not what happened in this case. Anyway, amazing what happens if you're just constantly refreshing, trying to, like, where's the stories on China, though?
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
He has set its sights on controlling 90% of the world's most advanced industries, including robotics, biotechnology, and artificial intelligence. To win the commanding heights of the 21st century economy, Beijing has directed its bureaucrats and businesses to obtain American intellectual property, the foundation of our economic leadership, by any means necessary.
Chairman Lee and I met yesterday. Chairman Lee indicated to me that Sun Paper has selected Arkadelphia in Clark County as the location of a $1 billion bioproducts mill.
Beijing now requires many American businesses to hand over their trade secrets as the cost of doing business in China. It also coordinates and sponsors the acquisition of American firms to gain ownership of their creations. Worst of all, Chinese security agencies have masterminded the wholesale theft of American technology, including cutting-edge military blueprints. And using that stolen technology, the Chinese Communist Party is turning plowshares into swords on a massive scale.
Well, thank you all for joining us via Skype from Beijing this morning. Here in Beijing, it is 10 p.m. in the evening. I've had a very successful trip to China.
China now spends as much on its military as the rest of Asia combined. And Beijing has prioritized capabilities to erode America's military advantages on land, at sea, in the air, and in space.
I've spoken at Tsinghua University here in Beijing, which was a treat for me to speak with young Chinese students about Arkansas, and also to talk about the relationship between China and the United States.
China wants nothing less than to push the United States of America from the Western Pacific and attempt to prevent us from coming to the aid of our allies. But they will fail. Beijing is also using its power like never before. Chinese ships routinely patrol around the Senkaku Islands, which are administered by Japan. And while China's leaders stood in the Rose Garden at the White House in 2015 and said that his country had, and I quote, no intention to militarize the South China Sea. Today, Beijing has deployed advanced anti-ship and anti-air missiles atop an archipelago of military bases constructed on artificial islands. China's aggression was on display this week when a Chinese naval vessel came within 45 yards of the USS Decatur as it conducted freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, forcing our ship to quickly maneuver to avoid collision. Despite such reckless harassment, the United States Navy will continue to fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows and our national interests demand. We will not be intimidated, and we will not stand down.
And we'll be calling on multiple prospects in China, as well as continuing our relationship with Sun Paper in Shandong Province.
In recent years, China has taken a sharp U-turn toward control and oppression of its own people. Today, China has built an unparalleled surveillance state, and it's growing more expansive and intrusive, often with the help of U.S. technology.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is hour number 2, the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine here. I saw this over the weekend, couldn't help it. Levi's or Wranglers. I tweeted this on my personal Twitter page at Paul Harrell 1776. Levi's or Wrangler blue jeans. Which jeans do Republicans and Democrats prefer? Believe it or not, this is crazy to me. Red and blue states are buying jeans differently. Republicans are more likely to wear. This is Fox Business. I know. Hey, you know what? It's Thanksgiving, so welcome to the news for the next 3 days. You know, like welcome. This is what happens when the headlines they just all kind of dry up. Republicans are more likely to wear Wrangler jeans, a brand popular in the West and Midwest, while Democrats favor San Francisco-based brand Levi's, appealing to Americans living in cities. Consumer research data. Also, this according to the Wall Street Journal. Levi's customer base shifted from 2004 to 2018, growing 3%, blah, 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 blah. Listen to this. The fashion favoritism stems from shoppers buying from brands that seem to appeal to their social and political views. A survey from public relations firm Edelman found that 60% of 1,000 Americans said they would avoid or choose a brand based on whether the brand aligns with their beliefs on social issues. What's more, 53% said all brands have a responsibility to get involved in at least one social issue that does not directly affect their business. Oh, we certainly know this, right? I mean, the left is so totalitarian in their thinking. They are to the point where they can't possibly buy a product from some company unless that company agrees with them on every issue. You think I'm kidding? And I mean on every issue. Like, you know, almost down to like, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream? Oh, it's not Rocky Road? Well, then I'm not going to buy from you. And seriously, now, I mean, it's all about the media hype, too. It's all about the media hype. You just take any company. Literally take any company, like, I don't know, Bubblicious bubble gum, you know, that you see at the counters at the grocery stores. You know, so you could take any reporter and you could go up to some executive at Bubblicious or whatever the company that owns that gum and stick a microphone in their face and ask them a question about, well, how come you guys don't have any gum that's for people who are transitioning from one gender to the other gender? And you know, like, now that's the story. Well, we don't see the need in that. You don't see the need in having a Bubblicious flavor gum for trans people? and then just it's huge. It's absolutely huge. It's like that Key and Peele sketch. Anybody see the Key and Peele sketch where they make fun of the legitimate Birmingham, Alabama story about the leprechaun in the socioeconomic deprived neighborhood? That was a real thing. And so Key and Peele did this sketch where they were like, "Oh, there's nothing new. The news is slow. What are we gonna do?" And it's like, "Hey, watch this. We'll just make up a story." And they go up to a random guy on the street and they say, "Oh, excuse me, sir. We've had reports of a Pegasus. There's been a Pegasus spotted. Have you seen it?" And the guy looks around. He's like, "Oh, I've seen the Pegasus. Yeah, I've seen the Pegasus." And then everybody, because people want to get on TV. So it's kind of like that, but you could do that with the trans community and just troll them by trigger and just get this huge reaction. Anyway, something to think about. But that's not why I did this segment. I did this segment because of Wrangler blue jeans. Because any chance to go back and listen to the state representative, Dan Douglas, from 2017, do you remember this? Oh, I know what you're looking for, Joe. He has a last minute addendum. Yes, okay, there it is. Yes, that has just been hanging out, like ready to go. So here's Dan Douglas. Okay, now what's interesting here is it does say that Republicans are more likely to wear Wrangler blue jeans. Now, Dan Douglas is in fact a Republican, even though his voting record does not reflect that of a Republican. He voted against a pro-life bill. He sponsored a bill to make assisted suicide legal in Arkansas. And then, of course, he likes to raise taxes, like the internet sales tax, which he failed to get done in 2017, even though he was giving us arguments like this. Listen.
It's not a no tax. And I want to use just a couple of examples to explain my feeling on this. I wear Wrangler blue jeans, all right? Why? Because they're cheap. I'm buying for $19.95 a pair. And they make my booty look better, or so I'm told. But the thing is, I buy 5 pair a year because I get them stained up and torn up on the farm. And I went to buy my annual 5 pair of Wrangler blue jeans, and I went to Academy Sporting Goods. They always have a good choice, but they only had 1 pair in my size. So I bought it, and I paid sales tax. I then went to my favorite place to shop, Tractor Supply Company, and I found 1 more pair in my size, and I purchased them, and I paid sales tax there. And then I thought, I'm tired of running around here looking for things. I'm going to go home and order them over the internet. And I went home and I ordered 3 more pair over the internet, and they did not collect and remit sales tax. They're the same brand of blue jeans, the same style, the same size, used on the same fat body for the same purpose. And they didn't collect sales tax. Now, is that fair? And part of our jobs is to be fair and equitable. As far as the fairness, I want to use one more example, and then I'm going to shut up. Y'all have heard enough of me this session, but as far as fairness goes, you don't have to smile that big, Representative Ballinger. But let's use an example. Say somebody had a Ford car dealership in, say, Gravette, Arkansas.
That's all I can handle. All right.
And
he does wear Wrangler blue jeans, and the survey does say that Republicans are more likely to wear Wrangler blue jeans. Now, fun fact, I just want to remind everybody, that was from 2017, and people didn't listen to him, meaning, they listened to him because his arguments were really funny, and we've got a whole music montage to prove that. But I will tell you that they were not able to get the Arkansas House of Representatives to go along with the internet sales tax in 2017, and they were able to get them to go along with it this year. Now, that's because of 2 reasons. The first reason, and probably the biggest reason, is because they really, really, really were looking for an excuse to take more of your money. And so they had a whole 2 years to come up with the excuses. The first excuse is the fact that the Supreme Court, in a completely boneheaded decision, decided to give the state of Arkansas authority over the sovereign state of any other state. So if you're an Indiana business and you don't have a physical presence here in Arkansas, the state of Arkansas now has authority over somebody. And it is a disastrous decision. It sets up a possibility for California to charge Arkansas a carbon tax because we have coal-fired power plants. Now, that may be a while away. I'm telling you, what it really did was set the stage for Congress to institute a national sales tax on the internet. And that's where this is fast going. So, number one, Dan Douglas's bill was unconstitutional. It was admittedly so. They knew they were doing this for Walmart so they could challenge it to get the ruling that they got anyway, because it was out of South Dakota. South Dakota had done something similar that was challenged. The second way they got the bill passed in 2019 that they couldn't get in 2017 with Dan Douglas's, I would say, just masterful arguing, is they decided to add a corporate tax cut to the piece of legislation. So here's your internet sales tax. It's going to take all of this money from the people that's not being taken from the people now, and will phase in a corporate tax cut, bringing the corporate tax from 6.9 down to 5.9%. And that's how they got the people to vote for it. Or it's, people are able to be like, well, I like corporate tax cuts, and so I didn't love it, but I voted for the bill for the corporate tax cuts, not for the tax increase. Okay, whatever you got to tell yourself. I get it. They put you guys in bad situations on purpose. I understand that's the way the game is played. But how many of you out there have a Chapter C corporation? Okay. How many of you on Friday are going to shop on the internet, or on Cyber Monday, a week from today, are going to be shopping on the internet? Virtually all of us. So they passed a piece of legislation that took a ridiculous amount of money from all of us so that corporations could have a tax cut here in Arkansas sometime in the future. Now, I would eliminate the corporate tax tomorrow if I were emperor. I would, because I think it's dumb and stupid, and I'd quit giving all the money to China. If you did those two things, you'd basically be a wash anyway. But I'd quit. Yeah, not just China, but I'd quit giving money to all the rest of them, including the Taekwondo dojo down in North Little Rock. That was what, $900-something thousand. But I'm not the emperor. I'm just pointing out, from a populist standpoint, what they did was extremely shallow, and it wasn't well thought out. And they just know that there's only me that's going to make this point. I'm the only one that's going to make the point. And, as long as you've got people like the Arkansas Democrat Gazette and Arkansas Business and the rest of them that are going to ignore giant stories like the governor's son's, the governor's law firm and his son having the same Chinese business as clients as the ones that are getting taxpayer money that are moving here, as long as they're going to ignore a story that big, well, you can bet they're not going to make the point, yeah, they got the internet sales tax passed, but it really doesn't look very good, does it? I wonder how many Democrats voted for that. I'm sure a lot of them did. Maybe not, though. They might have had a problem with the corporate side of things too. I don't know. I just find it was incredibly obtuse. It was almost naive. You're going to pass a tax on all of us that shop online. Oh, and by the way, the amount of revenue that tax is going to generate is going to be gargantuan compared to what they said it was going to be. And now they have come out and told members of the legislature that that there's no way to know how much more money the state of Arkansas is getting from the internet sales tax. There's no way to know. But I mean, counties apparently can figure it out. Cities can figure it out because the Jonesboro Sun, to their credit, is now every month charting the increase in sales tax revenues and sales tax collections. And they're even mentioning the fact that there's now an internet sales tax that's going not only to the state, but it's going to cities and counties. So I think it's just interesting to have a context and a long memory about how it is we got where we got here in the state. And, you know, if you don't have that public record, if you don't have the memory about what was said then versus what was said now, where we are today, it just opens the door for them to switch everything up on you, and you know, the common good is what is lost in that situation. Here is another update, though. State Representative Dan Douglas, you know, from what I can tell, not running, right, not going to seek another term. Instead, you've got a primary, which will be Republican primary for District 91 between Jorge Becker, Delia Hack, and Scott Richardson. So a three-way Republican primary. Now, Scott Richardson almost beat Dan Douglas last time, only lost by a handful of votes. Was it less than 10 votes or was it 12 votes? Something very close. So Scott Richardson trying to run for that seat again. Yeah, I've got it right here. Dan Douglas won with 946 votes to Scott Richardson's 934 back in a 2018 primary. So it was very close. Scott Richardson trying again. Obviously, he's got a base of support there. We'll see what happens. I definitely know why Scott Richardson ran the first time. He ran because he didn't agree with Dan Douglas's constant pursuit of more taxes, you know. And I think the reason Dan Douglas is not running for this time, the reason he didn't file, according to Ballotpedia, is because he had an assisted suicide bill and he voted against the pro-life trigger law that would make abortion in Arkansas, except when the life of the mother is at risk, illegal if we get another justice on the Supreme Court, or if the Supreme Court, you know, changes the law, overturns Roe versus Wade. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you guys saw the fake Fox News account on Twitter that tweeted that Ruth Bader Ginsburg had died. And I saw it, and I immediately retweeted, and then I was like, oh, that's a fake account. And so I undid my retweet, and then I posted, you know, fake accounts just because it's fake. But a lot of people fell for it because she was admitted to the hospital, and that's what it was. She was admitted to the hospital, so then a fake account went ahead and said she died, so it worked well, and I fell for it. I fell victim on Twitter to the fake Fox News channel account. We're going to take a break, going to reset. Back in just a moment.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
And when it comes to religious freedom, a new wave.
Bob Maloney here with a developing story from ASA News The Parrot. China is coming to Arkansas. We go live to the press conference where the Communist Chinese executive is addressing Arkansans for the first time. Let's listen into the translator.
我在这里 On behalf of the government of the People's Republic of China, we invite you to come and visit the newest named city in Arkansas, China, Delphia. We are very pleased to own an American city. Our communist government is proud to do business with the mediocre state of Arkansas. We are happy to take your money and your trees and send the profits back home. The Communist government of China was pleased to learn the taxpayers of Arkansas are excited to contribute their money with the hope, if you build it, one day jobs will come. We are excited to take your fields of capitalism and turn them into fields of communism, where every Arkansan has nightly dreams of Mao. China is looking forward to our investment of $1 billion in what is now called Arkansas. We see this as an investment in our future, and that future will be called New Beijing. Chinese investment will make Arkansas a great place for jobs, as the People's Republic of China will succeed where the Soviets failed. As we build our roots deep in Arkansas, we are thrilled with the potential new ideas and advancement we will share with our people back home. Soon we will have the world's largest runway in the South China Sea, and we thank Arkansas for contributing to our noble cause. In closing, once we make China great again, all of you will see the glory of the revolution of Mao. And Arkansas, whatever you do, please never call the FBI.
Paul Harrell, Parody.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for being with us. If you're just joining us, just a few things we talked about last hour. Huge victory for pro-democracy advocates out of Hong Kong. Hong Kong voters deliver a landslide victory for pro-democracy campaigners. Also, you can find this in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette this morning. China's detainee practices have been outlined through leaked documents about their re-education camps and the atrocities that go on there. We kind of decided to go ahead and start calling them concentration camps last hour. Also, you have the Department of Defense. The Secretary of Defense has fired Navy Secretary for lack of candor over the Eddie Gallagher case, whether or not to take his trident. The President tweeting, "Don't do it," last week, and the Secretary of the Navy saying, that wasn't an official order. The real reason that the Department of Defense has fired the Navy Secretary, or the President has fired the Navy Secretary, according to Fox News reporter Jennifer Griffin, U.S. official tells her when the Secretary of the Navy went to the White House to ask POTUS to let the Navy Review Board go forward, he promised the board would, in the end, allow Gallagher to keep his trident and rank. In other words, he promised to fix the results of the board, which is usually a board of peers. She goes on, "I'm told Navy Secretary Spencer blindsided Defense Secretary Esper and General Mark Milley, who had gone to the White House to defend the Navy's decision and ask that Trident Review Board be allowed to proceed. Then the White House told them they had already had a conversation with the Navy Secretary, and the White House told them that Spencer tried to basically cut a deal. This did not sit well with the Defense Secretary of the United States and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, because it was counter to Spencer's public statements. In other words, Spencer was not honest with them or the public, so Esper asked for his resignation. In the end, Navy Secretary Richard Spencer was not fired for standing up for military justice, but for dishonesty and undermining the military justice system. Isn't that the exact thing the media was claiming President Trump did when he intervened in these cases, taking care of our soldiers? And then what does the Navy Secretary do? He actually undermines it.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
And when it comes to religious freedom, a new wave of persecution is crashing down on Chinese Christians, Buddhists, and Muslims. Last month, Beijing shut down one of China's largest underground churches. Across the country, authorities are tearing down crosses, burning Bibles, and imprisoning believers. And Beijing has now reached a deal with the Vatican that gives the avowedly atheist Communist Party a direct role in appointing Catholic bishops. For China's Christians, these are desperate times.
So, do you like him as a candidate?
I think he's brought a lot to the table. It's not my message. I worry about the party in terms of expanding our base and what the message does to our recruitment of Hispanics, outreach to minorities. And so you've got to worry about the fall election and whether this is a message that's going to carry in Michigan, Ohio, and Florida, and those states that we need to carry.
The American people deserve to know. In response to the strong stand that President Trump has taken, Beijing is pursuing a comprehensive and coordinated campaign to undermine support for the president, our agenda, and our nation's most cherished ideals.
I think you've got to listen to what he says and how he conducts himself. And I don't know that he would be that different from what he is now in negotiating with Vladimir Putin. So,
you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
No, I don't think it's a good thing. We need people who, in the presidency, that understand how the world works, understands that there's a time for bluster and there's a time for reason.
The Chinese Communist Party is rewarding or
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
J.B. Deakins.
You know, when we look over this budget process, I don't know that I'm proud here tonight, sitting here with this final product. The process was a circus, to say the least. I completely agree with my colleagues that our employees are the most important asset that we have in this county. If we want to prioritize those raises, though, we should have done it at the front end of this budget. We have a spending problem in this county, and I want the public to understand that. It is out of control. There's no victory to say we have $4 million in reserves and we're now going to dip it below that. I'm going to commit myself to the budget that we all worked on and that we all approved in committee. It's very important for us to stick to some discipline in this fiscal process. Thank you very much.
All right. That
J.B. Johnson.
was last week. That's Washington County Justice of the Peace Patrick Deakins and he joins us now on the phone. Patrick, how are you this morning?
I'm good, Paul. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. Hey, that was I appreciate your passion. What's going on with the budgeting process in the Washington County Quorum Court?
Well, we just passed our budget last week, and that was some of the commentary that I had before we took the vote. Unfortunately, what has been too much of a process for Washington County and too much of now a ongoing thing is at the 11th hour they're throwing a bunch of spending and pork into that budget. In particular, last week it was moving a countywide raise for all the employees from 2% to 3%, which was not in the original budget that we passed out of committee. And so, what's disappointing is we try to be very deliberative in the things that we do in that budget, and then it gets tossed up to the quorum court, and all of a sudden all these other things get hung on it, and now of course the budget and the spending just grows. So the theme of Washington County continues to be spending. So
one of the clips that I also heard, we don't have this one queued up, but you said one more thing that I thought was really powerful. When you closed, expressing your disagreement with what was going on, you pointed to the audience and you reflected on the time that, when you were not on this quorum court, you were in the audience. Can you kind of tell us what you said again?
Yeah, so, this is my first term. To remind your listeners, this is my first year, basically rookie year of being a JP. And last year, right around this time, I sat out in the gallery with the public and watched the court do its work. At that time, there was a great concern about the amount of reserves that we have, and essentially that's just the savings account for the county to cover emergencies and things that we need to do, capital improvements and stuff like that. Well, last year they raised our property taxes, and the commentary at that time was, they kind of promised the people that tax increase, they were going to be responsible with it and fund the reserve. And unfortunately, that was completely untrue. They've spent every dime of that. We've contributed to that this year. So there is no more, we continue to deplete the reserve in Washington County. And my main objective when I said that, I want the people to understand this game that gets played. And because I feel like it's not this year, next year it's going to come up again to where it's going to be the same tune, different dance. They're going to say, hey, we need to fund the reserve and we want to raise your property taxes. Please cooperate with us and entrust us to do that. And I want everybody to remember that trust has already been violated. I don't want everybody to keep falling for this same mistake over and over and over again.
We're talking with Patrick Deakins. He's a Washington County Justice of the Peace. Definitely conservative. Matter of fact, Greg Harton has this great piece where he definitely said that you are on the right, on the conservative side of things. But he highlights this Washington County jail problem, and he highlights the fact that you are finding common ground with the pastor. Now, am I pronouncing this last name right? Schneckloth. Is that his last name?
Yes. Paul, this has been probably one of the most frustrating, but also one of the most rewarding issues I've dealt with on the court. It's kind of really hung over this whole term of just what we're doing with this jail issue and the overcrowding that we're experiencing and stuff. But what's really been inspiring to me is, and I think this happens on the national level, on the state level, and the local level, because I'm experiencing it, is it's taking people that have traditionally been pigeonholed into conservative or Republican and or Democrat and liberal, and we are attacking this issue from different points of view and from different angles. But I think what's really interesting is some of the solutions that we're seeing are common ground between us. And so it's been really good to see that there's problems that we can all address together and work together. It's not, like I'm saying, it's not Republican versus Democrat or liberal versus conservative. This is neighbors working with neighbors to try to solve this issue. And so that's been really rewarding from that standpoint.
Yeah, so he writes, I think it's safe to say Deakins approaches things from a conservative point of view. Conversely, Pastor Clint Schneckloth perspective is further left. They say, though, they have found common ground in searching for ways to reduce demand on the jail Washington County now operates. So tell us about the issue itself. Like, what are some of the ideas? Because I know, we've talked before, there seems to be this temptation to want to raise taxes to build a new jail.
Yeah. there is a hard push for that, and the people who are on the opposing side for me are really trying to twist our arm and say, hey, you've got to go ahead and build this jail. It's got to be done. We're losing time essentially. And my whole position is, we would be funding a system in my mind that has great underlying issues. So of course, if we build a jail, but our justice system has underlying issues that's adding to our inmate population, we're going to, of course, fill it up. And then instead of having a 750-bed problem, which is the problem we have now at our current size, we're going to have a 1,400-bed problem when we double it a few years down the road. So my idea, my push is, let's treat some of these underlying causes. I've talked to a lot of concerned people, and I've also talked to a lot of people that are involved in the criminal justice system. And just for example, one of the main things we know is people with mental health issues and or drug addiction issues are a great burden on our jail system. And we also have seen through countless studies that throwing those people in jail and housing them, one, it's not responsible from a general health population for your general health system from your population standpoint, but also fiscally, it doesn't make any sense, because what eventually happens is the recidivism rate when these people return to jail over and over again is very high. And so what happens is we just kind of get in this vicious circle of arrest, detention, arrest, detention, arrest, detention, where maybe if we spent our time and money in other places, we could break that cycle of arrest and detention through maybe some programs about addiction, or maybe getting that person with mental health issues into the right treatment environment instead of just throwing them in that county jail and in that environment that perpetuates whatever symptoms they might have.
I completely agree with that. That notion 100%. And, you know, I definitely know that as far as the drug addiction thing, that problem, I mean, that's something that has been skyrocketing all across the nation. A lot of it has to do with the fact that you have the crackdown, the regulatory crackdowns on opioids. So people are trying to get their fix somewhere else. That's why they're, you know, a lot of people are going back to heroin, needle sharing. I've been told by somebody that knows, that I trust, that's one of the reasons in my neck of the woods up over here in Northeast Arkansas, we had such a hepatitis outbreak, because it was actually sharing of needles. And that's what actually led to that. So, you know, there's a lot of other underlying factors to all of this. Now, this article talks about an older jail. What can you tell us about an older jail, the older space?
Yeah, before Washington County constructed and built its new jail, which I think was completed around 2005 and 2006, they had an older jail down on College Avenue, which was about a 240-bed facility. When Washington County completed their new jail, they moved out of that particular space, and at the time, I don't believe there was much of a need for it for the county. So what they did was they leased that to the state for $1 a year, and so the state now uses that as what I understand is a women's detention facility to hold some women prisoners. And so, you know, I had our county attorney pull that lease, and we looked at it, and the opportunity for Washington County now is that we could reclaim that building with 9 months' notice. That's all in the terms of the lease. And so that might give us at least some short-term or some possibility to do some other things with our inmate population as an alternative to building a double expansion onto our jail. So that's pretty exciting news for me. I'm going to continue to vet that out. But more broadly, I think this speaks to, there's been a great degradation of the partnership between the county and the state, and this jail issue really highlights that, Paul. The state's really neglecting their responsibility to both fund the inmates that we house for the state at the full rate, and then also it's the state's responsibility to fund prosecutors and public defenders that work in the judicial system and get these cases adjudicated and get them out of the way, and they're not adequately funding either of those things for Washington County. So, you know, I talk to people a lot, and they say, well, you know, the state has no appetite to help us out in the northwest part of the state. Little Rock's not going to help out the northwest counties, Benton or Washington, because they just view those as having, you know, a lot more opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that, whatever anybody thinks of that. But So we're really getting a cold shoulder in that sense. But when we talk about going down and reclaiming this lease, all of a sudden the state wants to tout the partnership that we have and how we need to work together and stuff like that. So, we'll see how that goes. This is it's a seed of an idea right now, but I'm really heavily wanting to pursue this and see if that can't be a solution for Washington County.
Wow. Well, yeah, anything but tax increase, and is I think that's a healthy mentality, and that's what that's the responsibility I know that you have to your constituents, because that's what you told them you do, and you're doing just that, looking at other options other than the normal. I mean, government's asking for tax increases is just the normal way things work, and it shouldn't be normal. That should be the exception, not the rule.
Absolutely. We see that is the normal thing, and that's the automatic reaction anytime especially Washington County faces a problem is, well, how do we go to the taxpayer and get this funded? How do we go to the taxpayer and fix this? And my whole deal is, let's be responsible with the money that we do have. I don't understand the concept of just continuing to go to the taxpayer. At some point in my mind, the taxation well runs dry, but that is not the mentality that people have. And to connect the two issues, the fact that we continue to spend outside of our bounds in the budget process, and we continue to live above our means from what the taxpayers have given us, is a great testament to me of why we can't continue to go to the taxpayers and have them fund jails and things like that. It's unfortunate that we get into this situation, and I just want people to be aware of it and get involved, because the automatic reaction is to come to them for the taxes. So,
yeah. Well, Patrick Deakins, we appreciate it, sir. It's always great to talk to you.
Thank you, Paul. Everybody be good and have a happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, sir. Happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy your time. Folks, we're going to take a break. Going to make a video of this one, post it everywhere. It'll be up at the YouTube channel at Conduit News. Subscribe and click the little bell to receive notifications. Back in a moment.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
We're seeing American businesses, movie studios, universities, think tanks, scholars, journalists, and local, state, and federal officials.
And then, Chairman, you'll look out in the audience and you'll see multiple members of the governor's cabinet. We're also here to support you. You'll see multiple members of the state legislative assembly. They're here to support you, and specifically Senator Caldwell, Senator Ingram, Representative Murdoch, Representative Hollowell. These are your senators and your representatives now. You call on them and they're going to help you, guarantee it. And Senator English, I saw you out there too. Thank you for being here as well.
As we speak, Beijing is employing a whole-of-government approach, using political, economic, and military tools as well as propaganda to advance its influence and benefit its interests in the United States.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work we're doing right here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Conduitforcommerce.org.
We're seeing American businesses, movie studios, universities, think tanks, scholars, journalists, and local, state, and federal officials.
And then, Chairman, you'll look out in the audience and you'll see multiple members of the governor's cabinet. We're also here.
Money, power, prestige, essence, 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 ace. Available now from aristocrats serving Arkansas. From the Nata Rhino collection. The fragrance of backroom deals. Nepotism. The aroma of higher taxes. Subliminal. Deception. Deep state. Ace. Made right here in Arkansas by a taxpayer-funded Chinese factory. Every bottle carefully crafted for you. Gender neutral. Nothing says aristocrat like Essence of Bureaucrat. Essence of Bureaucrat by Asa.
Available now in the Marble Palace gift shop.
Paul Harrell parody. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for being with us. Telephone number 870-275-9799. You know, I had an interesting text. So you guys know, you guys have been following the show for a while. We're essentially the only ones at this point that are just continuing to cover. Well, now the story is no one else will cover, like the statewide media, the mainstream media. The mainstream media will not cover and tell their readers that Governor Hutchinson's law firm is representing the same clients. Now his son is working for that law firm, but representing the same clients that have been given Arkansas taxpayer money. Those clients happen to be communist Chinese entities disguised as companies. Okay? Now, I get it. The administration would disagree with me calling it the governor's law firm because they do claim that he has divested, that he doesn't, but yet his name is still on it, and he's listed as an attorney in the site on the website. He's listed as an attorney there, and he's used in press releases to, talk about it. He's the governor, founder of the firm is the governor, and he's connected, So the story is kind of morphed into the fact that nobody wants to cover the story, which is really frustrating. So I got a text message, and this is a very interesting thought, and I want you to really think about this and give it some consideration. The mainstream media needs to really think about what they're doing by not covering this story. You're going to give multiple days coverage about State Representative Mickey Gates. And I don't care what you say about Mickey, okay? You guys were essentially trying to say, that, look, here's a guy, he's a public official, and because he's a public official, he thinks he doesn't need to pay taxes. That's the initial reaction, regardless of, maybe there are more facts out there. Clearly, if you listen to Mickey Gates on the House floor, there's a lot more facts out, or there's a lot more to the story than you would think, okay? A lot more to the story. So the media talks about that front page news for a year off and on, and they can't find it in themselves to write a story about this obvious appearance of unethical. It just, the whole thing is unethical. So by not covering this story, the mainstream media are sending a signal to Arkansas elected officials everywhere that they have a green light to use their offices for their own personal gain or their family's own personal gain. What do you think about that? You think that's legit? Do you think that that is something that is true? Because I certainly, I do. I think that's 100% where we are right now. I hate to say this, but do you think that if Governor Hutchinson had a record of cutting spending, lowering taxes, lowering the overall tax burden, not just a tax here, a raise here, but lowering the overall tax burden, if he had, if Governor Hutchinson was a full-throated supporter of President Donald Trump and the work he's doing draining the swamp, do you think that the Democrat Gazette would run the story then? I think we all know the answer to that. Why hasn't the Arkansas Democratic Party, in the midst of their Josh Mahoney buffoonery and looking like they don't know what they're doing, I mean, just looking like completely inept, like looking like a party that's just totally irrelevant, not even on paper, it's just not relevant. They're not even going to have somebody on the ballot. In the midst of all of that, the Arkansas Democrat Party, to my knowledge, hasn't said a word about the governor and his law firm and his son and the Chinese. Maybe I've missed it. If I have, I will correct the record. Eagerly correct the record. I mean, is it big? I mean, we are seeing, man, politics doesn't even begin to describe. I mean, we are seeing it's just all on full display. It really is. The telephone number again, 870-275-9799. Really appreciate you guys sticking with us on this Monday. Again, we got a great show for you coming up tomorrow. Certainly don't want to miss it. We'll be talking tomorrow with Family Council's Ken Yang. It's always great to talk to him, among other individuals. Also on Wednesday, we've got candidate for State Representative David Ray will be back with us on Wednesday. So excited to have that. And also, I want to remind everybody, as we gear up, we ramp up towards this time with family and to be thankful for what we have. On Wednesday, we will be reviewing the Thanksgiving Day proclamations of Abraham Lincoln and George Washington because they are so relevant to where we are today. And I'm also told that did you see that the turkeys that the president is going to pardon were like staying in a hotel? Did you see that, Joe? I saw it on Twitter. It's pretty interesting. Okay, let's see, what else do we have here? We've got the YouTube videos coming up. We're going to be posting Michael Busler. We talked to Michael Busler earlier about negative interest rates. That's going to be up at the website later today, Conduit News. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's what you can do to help us out, immensely. Also, Patrick Deakins, really good. I mean, that's an example of where live streaming is certainly beneficial. The fact that Patrick Deakins, we were able to we were able to hear what he had to say about the outrageous budget practices. And here's your meme of the day, ladies and gentlemen. This is pretty good. From 4_ touchdowns on Instagram, Hillary Clinton, with the classic Chris Farley, Billy Madison meme. I'm under enormous pressure from many people to run for office. No, you're not. No, I'm not. We'll post that up at the Conduit News Twitter, at Conduit News. That's at Conduit News. Folks, thanks so much for being with us. We will see you tomorrow with bells on. Arkansas, be safe.